Hello and welcome to this short video that will quickly take you through all the new features in the user interface of the Self-Serve Labs, or SSL for short. As you can see in this first screen, I am now logged into the new UI for SSL. And if you notice on the scheduling page, it looks slightly different. I'm going to fly in this screenshot here to show you what it looked like in the previous version and what it looks like now. In the old version, there used to be a step 1 and a step 2, whereas step 1 would let you select your content pack and step 2 would let you select the date that you would like to schedule your pod at. And if you notice below those two steps 1 and 2, there's a scheduling section. And if you notice on the GUI behind the screenshot, there is only a selection for the content pack, so it's a much cleaner screen than the previous version of the GUI. So let me remove the screenshot and let's take a look at the new scheduling process. If you're not on the scheduling page, you can click Schedule on the navigation pane. Once on the Schedule page, you'll see that there's a content pack dropdown. You will only see content in there that your username has the rights to be able to see. Once you select the content pack that you wish to reserve, you will notice that the scheduling calendar will pop up for the start date. Select your start date. Any days that are grayed out are unavailable. Then select your end date on the end date calendar. Once you have selected your end date, scroll down and you will notice that there is a deal ID. Enter the deal ID for this particular customer if there is one. Next, enter your pod usage. You can have practice and preparation or customer presentation. Then enter some additional information if needed, then click schedule. Once you click schedule, notice that the system will clear the screen and the upper right hand corner will have a message about what you scheduled and what the time and date is. We scheduled this for the future, so notice in the left hand side in the navigation pane, there now is a reservation for an SDA Pod 3. That wasn't there previous to us scheduling. You can clear the message in the upper right hand corner by clicking the X in the right hand side. Notice in the navigation pane under Active Pods, you see that we have an SDA Demo Pod 1 that was there, and I started that before we started this video. If I click on the reserved pod, notice I will get a pop-up message letting me know when this session is going to start and what is going to be started. I would have got a pop-up on the active one as well, but I've already been in it once. You only see this pop-up message the first time you go into a pod. I can close the pop-up message by clicking the X in the upper right-hand corner. Remember, I'm in the non-active pod, the one that has a reservation for Sunday, and today is Thursday. So if I click on one of the controls on the right-hand side, I'll get the normal pop-up window, but notice that it says the pod is not active, so I can't click on anything or do anything. But if I close that little pop-up window by clicking on the X, and then I click on the Facilitator's Guide, I can go to the box folder with the Facilitator's Guide. And if I close that box folder and go back over to the control panel, I can also click on the SEs folder and go to that box folder. So I have access to my documentation folders. I don't have access to the control of any of the devices. If you click the support button on the right hand side, you'll notice that it now takes you to a Smartsheet form, and you can fill in this form to open a ticket to get help for Self-Serve Labs. Fill in the Smartsheet form and click submit, and someone from the Self-Serve team will get back to you shortly. The red cancel button for reservations or deactivation button for active pods should be clicked if you no longer need the reservation or the active pod. The red cancel button on reservations and the red deactivation button on an active pod are very important buttons. Please use the red cancel or deactivation button on any and all pods that you no longer need. This will free up limited resources for other SEs to use. We have added by popular demand the blue share button in the upper right hand corner of a reservation and or an active pod. When you click the blue button, it brings up the share window, and in that share window there is a email field. If you fill in an internal or external address into that field, you can then select the rights for that user. If you notice right now, it's on full access. If I click to the white line on the right of full access, it will slide across to view only and become blue. If I click on the white line to the left of View Only, it will slide back and be full access. So select the rights that you want for this user, and we'll explain the rights a little bit later in the video. Then click Add Share. Notice it puts the email address below. You can click the trash can to delete it, or click the URL button to put that URL into your buffer. It creates a URL per user. You can add more than one user to the share. I'm going to slide the browser to the left and have two browsers on the screen. Notice the one on the left is the owner of the pod's browser, and the one on the right will be our guest, or what we call our share user. Now at the top, notice that I have selfservelabs.cisco.com. We can't use that particular URL to log in as one of our shared users. We have to use the URL that we copied to our buffer from the owner's page. So the owner would have to email or instant message that new URL to the shared user. The system does not email the shared user once you add them to the system. You have to send them that link either by email or instant message. So I'm going to paste that URL that I copied to the buffer when we shared the user in the owner's browser. I'm going to paste that into the shared user's browser. Now notice that it went to a countdown timer and says we have 1 day, 8 hours, and 26 minutes left. That is because this is a shared pod that has not become active yet and is going to start in the future. If we look over in the pod owner's browser, on the left-hand side of the navigation pane, you will notice that there is an active pod and a reservation pod. The pod that the shared user tried to log into was the reserved pod called SDA Pod 3. Let's go ahead and share an active pod by clicking on it under Active Pod so that you can see what it looks like to log in as a shared user in an active pod. Now that we've clicked on the active pod, let's click the blue share button and share this with a user. So in the email field, put it in an internal or external email address. Then select your rights, whether you want full access or read-only or view-only access, and then click the Add Share button. Once you do that, it puts the information below. Again, remember you can click the trash can button to delete this, or you can click the URL button to put that URL into your buffer. Now let's take that URL and paste it into the shared user's browser. And notice that instead of going to a timer, it's now going to take us to a login screen. So now let's talk about the shared user. If the shared user is a user that already has an account on the system, they should be able to use their username and password and log in at this time. But if this user is a guest user, meaning they never had an account with Self-Serve Labs, they won't have a password to log in. They're going to have to use the I forgot my password button on the bottom and then put in their email address and then click the button to get an email at that address. If you try to put in a different email address, it will obviously not make it to them. So you have to put in the correct address, click on the Recover My Password button, and then wait for the email. Once you get the email, click on the link. It'll take you back to Self-Serve Labs and allow you to put in a new username and password. So now let's get that URL again from our shared URL. Let's go back into our shared user browser, paste that address in, and go back to the login screen. Now I'm going to put in my username. If I put in a username that does not exist on the system or is not a share, it will let you know. And then put in the password that I just changed by using the I forgot my password button. Now when I click and sign in, notice that I have some pods in my left-hand navigation pane of my shared user's browser. Notice at the top of the shared user's browser's navigation pane, it has a shared pod with a timer after it. That indicates that it's an active pod that has been shared. Notice down below that is a reserved pod. That is a pod that has been reserved by this user, so you know that this user actually has an account with the Self-Serve Labs. And notice at the bottom of the navigation pane, there is a shared reservation. That is the one that we just shared with the shared user just a few moments ago. So I'm going to focus on that shared reservation by clicking on the SDA Pod 3 under Shared Reservations. When you click on a reservation or an active pod for the first time, you'll get some information that pops up in a pop-up window. It'll tell you what time this is going to become active and also who shared it with you. I close the box by clicking the X. And also, if you notice, with a shared reservation that was read-only, if I click on it, notice first of all that the pod is not active, but I don't have a reboot button in this box, only a console button. By not having that reboot button, it's an indicator that I only have read-only rights to this shared pod. Remember, when a pod is active, you still have access to the facilitator's guide and any other documentation that would normally be available before the pod goes active. Now I'm going to click on the active shared pod that is in view-only mode. When I click on it to bring it to focus, I have access to the consoles and I have access to the documentation. If I click on the jump box button, it'll open up a pop-up window. Again, notice I don't have a reboot. That's an indicator that I have read-only. If I click on the console button, it will open a new tab and take me to the console of that jump box. Once the tab opens with the jump box, if I click on anything, it won't let me click on anything because I'm in view-only mode of the shared pod. I'm going to close this jump box browser and let's take a look at some of the shared attributes for these pods. So first of all, let's go back to the pod owner's browser and I'm going to click on the reserved pod. When I click on that pod to bring it to focus, I have the ability to go back and click on the blue button that'll open up the shared properties window. I cannot change the attributes about an already shared user, but I can click on the trash can to remove that user. So I've removed that user and closed the pop-up window. Now let's go back to the shared user's browser and click refresh and see if that reservation goes away. When I click refresh, notice that it disappears from the bottom of the navigation window. So now let's go change the rights attribute for this user in the active pod. So back on the pod owner's browser, I'm going to click on the active pod to bring it to focus, then click on the blue link to open the shared attributes. Then I'm going to click the trash can to remove that user because I can't change the attribute once they've already been shared. So I'll put that same name back in the email field again. I'm going to leave it on full access this time instead of going to view only and click add share. Then I'm going to close this pop-up window and return to the shared browser's window and click refresh. Then I'm going to click on the active pod again to bring it to focus, and when I click on the jump box this time, notice that I have the reboot button, meaning I have full access, and when I click on the console button, it will open that jump box again, and if you notice, I can click on stuff in here. I'm going to click on Firefox, and notice that Firefox opens. Thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you for future videos. This is Paul Stryer. Have a good day.